Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to give everyone a minute or two to filter in. So if you need to go grab some water, grab a snack, feel free to do that. And we'll get started in about 90 seconds or so. All right. It looks like we have a great crowd here. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to be talking about scheduling and how it relates to student success. So let's go ahead and kick off with some introductions. Hi, everyone. My name is Bridget Moran. I'm our content manager here at CourseDog. So really invested in all things research and content related. Particularly passionate about thinking about how we can optimize our schedules for students. So really excited to be speaking with everyone here today. And I'll pass it over to Mara now.
Thanks, Bridget. Hi, everyone. I'm Mara. I've been at CourseDog almost 4 years now. In my time here, have worn a number of different hats, including leading implementations with institutions, and more recently, the last year and a half, have been a product manager for scheduling and analytics. So both of those tools are really focused on how can we approach student-centric scheduling to help progress students to their degree and also successfully allocate resources. So really excited to be chatting today.
Awesome. Thanks, Mara. Well, before we dive into things today, I want to provide a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about. So we'll begin today by looking at what some of the research tells us about the connection between scheduling and student success. From there, we'll look at some of the common scheduling challenges that many institutions face and how students are impacted by these challenges. And specifically, we'll look at how some of our most underserved students on campus are really impacted by scheduling practices that don't meet their needs. And finally, we'll go through some practices to ensure that all students have equitable access to the courses that they need. We'll go through how to solicit student feedback, use data to inform your schedule, and the role that technology plays in all of this. And of course, we'll leave time for questions at the end. If you do have any questions that come up throughout the presentation, feel free to put those in either the Q&A function or the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get to those either in the moment or perhaps save those for the end of the presentation. We'll also be conducting a few polls throughout today's session, so really looking forward to getting everyone's perspective on this topic and learn a little bit more about how you're approaching it on your campus. One question that I know we frequently get is, will we be sharing the recording of this? Will we be sharing the deck? The answer is yes. We will be sending this out to everyone at the end, so don't worry, you will have that for your reference. All right, well, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into things. So, Mara and I spent a lot of time talking to folks across higher ed about their scheduling practices and the pain points that they experience. And I highlighted a couple of the common themes that we hear on this slide here. And I'll note these are coming from institutions of all shapes and sizes. And one common theme that comes across through all these comments is current scheduling practices really aren't working for students. Whether this is not having enough courses or sections available for students, or perhaps those courses have overlapping times. And sometimes students don't even know how to find the courses that they need. And of course, what's on the slide here is really just a small sampling of what we hear. And we know that these problems certainly aren't unique to all of us on the line right now. I think some people would perhaps say, there's a crisis and students are feeling the effects of not being able to get into the courses that they need. I think it's no secret to anyone here that a significant number of students aren't enrolled in enough credits to finish their degree on time. The first 15 to Finish campaign was launched, I to enroll in 15 credits in their first semester to stay on track for an on-time completion. And while it might seem obvious to us that students need to take 15 credits a term to finish on time, many students actually aren't aware of this. And these 15 to Finish campaigns across the country have shown strong results, but there's definitely still a lot of work to do. And I think the data on this slide here really demonstrates just how far we have to go. Across the board, students aren't taking enough credits to finish their degrees on time. And, there are definitely variations across different institutional segments, but I think we can all agree that we have our work cut out here. On the left, you'll see the average number of credit hours taken by all students in their first year. And it paints a kind of alarming picture. However, on the right, we see an even more concerning picture if you look at the number of credits taken by Pell Grant students in their first year. If you look at the comparisons across four-year institutions, excluding those research institutions, 31% of all students take 30 credits in their first year, while only 26% of those Pell Grant students at those same institutions take 30 credits in their first year. And the disparity is actually even greater if you look at four-year institutions with the highest research designation. At those institutions, 45% of all students take 30 credits in their first year, compared to just 36% of their Pell Grant peers. And this is concerning for a number of reasons, but I think we really have to think first and foremost about what impact is this having on students. The data on this slide is from studies done within the University System of Georgia, and it shows the percentage of students at state universities that graduated within 6 years based on the number of credits taken in their first semester. When I first looked at these numbers, I honestly was pretty startled. The study found that while 54% of students that took 15 or more credits in their first semester graduated within 6 years, only 43% of their peers that took 12 to 14 credits graduated within the same time period. And just 22% of students who took 7 to 11 hours in their first semester graduated within 6 years. And we know this trend isn't unique to Georgia. Research done in Tennessee among community college students found very similar findings. They found that students who took 15 or more credits in their first semester were 6.4% more likely to graduate, controlling for other factors. And the same study showed that four-year students taking 15 credits or more in their first semester were 11% more likely to graduate. So I think this begs the question, if we know that the number of credits students take in their first term has such a large impact on their ability to graduate, then why aren't students taking, a full load in their first term in their first year? I think just like many of the other problems in higher ed, we know that there isn't just one root cause for this problem. Like I mentioned earlier, some students don't even know what counts as a full load. And while students need to take 15 credits a semester to graduate on time, federal financial aid only requires students to take 12 credits this semester to maintain that full-time status. So this might mislead some students into thinking that, 12 credits a semester, that's actually enough for them and all they need. We also know that external factors influence students' decisions to take a full-time load or not. Friends, family, or maybe even in some cases advisors might counsel students to, ease into their college career. But what they don't know is that studies have shown that students who take 15 credits in their first semester don't actually fare any worse than their counterparts who take fewer credits. And some studies have even shown that students are more likely to earn better grades if they take a full load in their first year. And of course, I think it's always important to note our students juggle many commitments outside of their studies. Many of them are caregivers, they're employees, they have a lot going on outside of just school. So there's a lot of different avenues we could go down here, but where we'll be focusing our time today is course accessibility. So if students can't access the courses they need, then they won't take enough credits to stay on track for that on-time completion. I think this quote here on the right by Dr. Tristan Dunley really sums it up well. He told us that oftentimes students aren't able to take the classes they need because of the way we create the schedule. And he's not the only one who's told us this. I love the quote here on the slide by one of our partners, Dr. Casey Bullock out of Weber State University. And he noted that it's easy to say that students, aren't following the plan, they aren't following the process. But ultimately, we really have to investigate what we're doing and ask if we're making it more difficult for students to get through. And how often are we creating these roadblocks? These are exactly the type of questions we've been asking ourselves. We know that the students today look different than the students, 5, 10, 20 years ago. They're older, they're more experienced with technology, they have higher expectations and more obligations. So we've been asking ourselves, how can we make it easier for them to access the courses they need and, at the times that work for their schedule and with their other commitments? So last year, we conducted a survey with ACRO on this topic, and we really wanted to get, the prospective practitioners in the field to, see how they're doing with their course schedule. And the survey was pretty interesting. We heard back from over 340 institutions that responded to the survey, and just 27% of them agreed that their institution engages in student centric scheduling. So this means that almost 3 out of 4 institutions either, disagrees or can't fully say that they conduct student-centric scheduling. So let's go ahead and take a look at why student-centric scheduling isn't happening and what some of those ramifications might be.
So we're going to spend the next portion of our session discussing how scheduling practices create barriers for students. We'll also look specifically at how some of our most underserved students aren't being served by current scheduling practices. So I'm sure many of the errors that are laid out on the slide resonate with a lot of you on the line today. Class conflicts come up in almost every conversation I have with academic administrators about their scheduling challenges. Scheduling staff spend numerous hours coordinating the schedules that they receive from multiple academic units and entering this information manually into the SAS. And they often don't have the time or the capability to audit if all of the co-recs or prereqs for each academic program are scheduled at different times so that students can actually get into them. Invariably, some of these courses slip through the cracks and are scheduled at the same time. So once the schedule goes live, students notify administrators of the conflict, who then must either move or cancel the conflicting courses. And then students planning to take or already registered for the competing courses are left scrambling at the last minute to find a new section or course that works with their schedule that will also keep them on track. The next 2 scheduling errors are perhaps less common, but also have an outsized impact on the students that are impacted as a result of them. So for dual grading, students may sign up for a class that they are not as strong in, thinking that they'll be able to take it, pass or fail. However, due to an error in how the class was advertised, they found out only after registering that they must take the class for a grade. Finding out this information after registering for their courses can completely throw students off and give them very little time to react, if any at all. And then similarly, errors related to variable unit classes add an unnecessary burden on students to quickly determine how they'll be able to take enough credits to stay on track and maintain their financial aid. So we know from talking to our partners that inefficiencies in the course scheduling process lengthen time to completion for students. But what does this really look like across the sector? So we recently partnered with University Business to conduct a survey on academic operations and how inefficiencies impact students. From the over 220 responses we got, 65% of the respondents said that course scheduling issues either significantly or somewhat impact students' time to completion. This is pretty staggering. So we know that scheduling errors impact students from what we just saw, but there are also other factors at play when creating the course schedule. In the same ACRO survey that Bridget mentioned a few slides ago, we asked institutions about the top factors they considered when creating the course schedule. You'll see that the schedule from the previous term, faculty availability and faculty preference, were the top 3 factors. Not in the top 3, notably, were student need or other student-related metrics, such as projected new student enrollment, number of students waitlisted for a course, student ability to attend class when it is offered, and others. So what happens when faculty preferences are put first and student needs aren't closely examined? So I want to go ahead and do our first poll now. We'd love to learn from those on the line about what you're hearing from students at your institution. What complaints do you commonly hear when it comes to course access? So we went ahead and launched the poll. We'll leave it open for about 60 seconds or so if you can go ahead and complete what you see. Perfect. So let's go ahead and get those last votes in, and then we'll go ahead and close the results here. So what we're seeing is that overwhelmingly, the class that students need is already full. Anecdotally, that's definitely something that we hear a lot from the campuses that we work with. Also, a close tie is the time that the class is offered doesn't work with student schedules. We a lot of times see, and we talked about as well, that many times co-requisites are classes that students need to take in a term to stay on track. So those critical classes aren't scheduled at times the student can take them, either because they're at conflicting times or there aren't enough sections offered. Another one that we're seeing a lot of is a class that they need to take isn't offered this term. That's absolutely something that we see as well. Bridget, what do you think about these results?
Yeah, I think this is pretty interesting. It's interesting. I feel like in these poll results, usually there's like one category that stands out more than others, but it seems like this is fairly even across the board, which I think is pretty interesting. But yeah, I agree. I think the class I need is already full. It definitely comes to mind. We hear that a lot from folks that we talk to, so that makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. And I'd say that item, and then also with the classes being offered at conflicting times, both really align with, or rather misalign with student demand, which I think is a good transition into our next conversation, where the student complaints highlighted on this slide show what happens when schedules aren't based on student needs and neglect to look at the data around what students need to take at that point in graduation or in their career progression. So schedules are created from scratch each year based on the guesses and preferences of academic departments, or schedules are rolled from one year to the next with little insight into how student demand is changing over time. So I was talking to one university registrar, and they told me that even if student preferences aren't changing, oftentimes the schedule being rolled over never completely met student needs in the first place. In their words, we roll over schedules, but we just roll over problems. The same courses don't offer enough sections each year, and students wonder why they aren't able to enroll in them. Or classes aren't offered at times that work for a majority of student schedules. Students with jobs or caretaking responsibilities often have different times that they are available than students that are able to take classes throughout the day. So I'm sure some of you have heard these complaints from students and could add your own to the list as well. So while course accessibility challenges impact all students, we know they have an outsized impact on the most underserved students. We could probably talk all day about this slide all day long, so I'll just go over a couple of examples. I know many of administrators are worried about employed students being able to access the courses they need while also balancing their jobs. Will these students be able to take all the courses they need either before or after they go to work? These students often can't afford to be on campus all day and have their classes spread out over 7 or 8 hours. Other students are disproportionately impacted by scheduling errors. For example, if two required courses are accidentally scheduled at the same time, students are forced to choose between courses and as a result may not take a full load. So this can impact students that need to maintain a certain load to qualify for their financial aid. And similarly, if a course with variable units is incorrectly marked, students may find out only after they registered for the course that they actually won't receive the number of credits they expected. While these errors may not happen often, when they do, it can have large ramifications for our underserved students and could delay or even remove the possibility that they'll complete their degree. I also know this slide doesn't even cover all of the various student groups that we could talk about when it comes to course access. I've also talked with administrators that are concerned about course access for transfer students, students that commute home on the weekends, gap year students, student athletes, and the list goes on. So let's go ahead and do another poll. We just spent some time talking about how different groups of students can be impacted by a schedule that isn't created with their needs in mind. We'd love to hear from you about which groups of students on campus you're most worried about accessing the courses that they need to graduate. So please select which groups of students you're most concerned about of the group shown here. And if there's another group we don't have listed here, go ahead and select other and type your answer into the chat. So we went ahead and launched the poll. We'll leave it open similarly for about 60 seconds and then discuss the results.
And I'll also note here, I know this is a single choice, and oftentimes folks are like, oh, I could select all of them. So if you could just go ahead and maybe prioritize which group of students is top of mind for you, I think that would be helpful.
Let's take another 10 seconds or so. Awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll and talk through the results together. So what we see overwhelmingly here is that the majority of you all are concerned around employed students, so those students that have career or job obligations outside of attending school. Another one that is high up there is students with children. So of course, that's a full-time job in itself and a lot of balanced competing priorities there. And then we also see low-income students. So those students that may not have the resources to already set them up for success within the institution and need to balance being able to access financial aid and ensure they're able to graduate in an efficient time. Bridget, do you have any additional thoughts on these results?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important when thinking about this too that I'm sure there's probably a lot of overlap between these student groups as well. You know, oftentimes students with caretaking responsibilities, you know, they also have a job too, so they can, you know, meet the financial needs of their family. So I think that makes a lot of sense that we're seeing, you know, the employed students rise to the top here. 'Cause, you know, similarly, if you're a low income student, you're probably relying on a job to help pay for your tuition. So definitely makes a lot of sense to me. All right, great. Well, I know we just talked about a couple of the different types of student groups that are impacted by scheduling practices, but want to dive deeper into a couple of these different groups. And I think luckily this pairs pretty well with what we saw on the poll results there on that last slide. So first off, students with children, those with caretaking responsibilities, we know that they often have time constraints due to those commitments, and oftentimes they need to be able to complete their courses during school hours while their children are away. So institutions with large populations of students with caretaking responsibilities should consider questions such as, you know, how far away are those local K through 12 schools from your campus? What times are those schools in session? And do schools or other local organizations in the area offer childcare before and after school? So, for example, I was recently talking with one community college administrator, and she was telling me that, like many of you, many students on her campus have children that go to local schools. And in order to accommodate this large population of students, they're actually going ahead and introducing scheduling bans. And these allow students to take all of their classes between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So that way, once classes are over at 2 p.m., they'll then have enough time to go and pick up their kids from school. Employed students is another population that often has time constraints when it comes to classes. I know this was the group that rose to the top of our poll results. So I think there are a couple of different ways we can think about this, such as, you know, what types of industries do your students work in? Who are the major employers in those industries in your local community? And what are their hours of operation? So, for example, if students commonly work in, say, retail or hospitality, you know, these are industries, excuse me, that typically need workers, you know, more commonly in the afternoons and evenings. Next, how are students that rely on public transportation able to access their courses? Do the courses begin, say, before the first bus arrives? Do the courses end after the last public transportation option leaves? And say if the bus doesn't arrive very frequently at night, will students have a safe place to wait after their course ends? And finally, on this slide here, low income students. I think this is a really important one to think about because oftentimes we need to think more holistically about how course access and timing also relates to other services that those students rely on. For example, can students easily access tutoring services or technology labs before or after their scheduled classes? Will cafeterias or food carts be open or, near where these courses are offered? I know we could probably spend all day talking about this, so I want to now move on to our next section and talk about some practices that we can implement to actually go ahead and help meet these needs. So, for the last portion of today's session, we're going to talk about how to solicit student feedback, use data to inform your schedule, and the role that technology plays in all of this. So definitely a lot of talk to talk about here. So let's go ahead and get into it. During my time at CourseDog, I've spent a lot of it interviewing academic administrators. And in those conversations, I always like to ask, are you collecting student feedback when it comes to scheduling challenges? Do you know what pain points your students are feeling? And most administrators told me that, they've heard a lot of anecdotal feedback, but they don't actually have a central place for storing student scheduling requests. However, I did speak with one institution that implemented at least what I think is a pretty easy solution for collecting student feedback. I really love this practice because it's something that can be implemented fairly easily. This institution created an online shareable spreadsheet that deans, course schedulers, advisors, and student success coaches can access. Whenever a student came to one of those individuals with a class issue or a request, they noted it in the spreadsheet for everyone to see. Deans could then view the spreadsheet and, see if there was a critical mass of requests, in one area. And based on those documented requests, they could then go ahead and add courses or sections to meet that student demand. Of course, as their capacity and resources allowed them to. If that dean then decided to go ahead and open up a new course, they'd then go ahead and email the advisors to let them know about the class opening so they could pass that along to students. This seemingly simple process can have a big impact. At the institution I spoke with, they were able to open up 17 new classes as a result of this tracking. And this isn't just a huge win for students that otherwise would have, not been able to take their classes, but also an additional source of tuition revenue for the institution. And this is really, just one way of tracking student preferences, but I think there are also some more proactive ways we can think about soliciting student feedback. While institutions frequently survey their students on a variety of topics, course scheduling is rarely one of those topics. However, these questions can yield helpful insights for creating the course schedule. The areas listed on the left, you'll see here are modality, time of day, and day of the week. And I think these preferences are certainly important, but I think the topics on the right side of the slide here are just as important. Institutions should, really seek to understand how different groups of students are impacted by course access and ask demographic questions such as about their enrollment status, the campus they attend, and the goals of their studies. Surveys are also a great way to gather feedback about barriers to course access, both at the institutional and at the personal level. So, some of those questions might look like: are students unable to access courses they need because they were already full? Or were the courses not offered at the time that worked for their schedule? On a more personal level, like we've mentioned, students are dealing with a lot of other factors. They might be dealing with childcare, work, or transportation issues that impact when and how they're able to take the courses they need. And I'll finish off this slide by saying, I know that we all need to be wary of, not over surveying our students. I think particularly these last few years during the pandemic, students have been able to have been asked to complete a lot of surveys. So even if you're able to just group in a couple of questions to a broader survey, I think that can also be a great way to go there too. So I will hand it back over to Mara now to talk a little bit about the data piece here.
So we've also talked about the role of data in course scheduling. Last year, we conducted a survey with university business and we asked about the role of data in this process. So the good news is the majority of institutions are using data to some extent to inform their course scheduling processes. However, almost half of institutions reported that they somewhat use data in the course scheduling process. This is somewhat puzzling. In an age of information overload, why aren't we using all of the information we have to create truly student-optimized scheduling? Let's take a look at some of the data points that can help create a student-centric schedule. So historically, there's always been a bit of guesswork when it comes to creating the course schedule. As we mentioned previously, the ACRAL survey found that faculty availability and faculty preference were the two top factors. Using these factors to create the course schedule means the schedule is more centered on faculty needs than it is on student needs. Additionally, looking at data from previous term schedules gives an incomplete picture of how student demand may be changing over time or how it may not have ever been met by historical schedules. There is a huge opportunity here for many institutions. Looking at degree planning data from student education plans can also help institutions see into the future and assess which courses students plan to take and in what term. It can also help scheduling teams see which courses are critical for a student to complete their program versus which courses may have some wiggle room for scheduling. There are also a few other metrics to keep in mind. There's so much data we can use to help us build a schedule that puts student needs first. We've listed out a few more metrics here. First, course distribution throughout the day and week. I'm sure you've all experienced pain points here. Classes are packed between 10 and 2, and faculty may be reluctant to teach outside of these hours, even if this is when students need to take their courses. I was talking with one administrator, and she told me that a student working in her office told her she couldn't work on Tuesday and Thursday. When she asked why, the student said that all of the classes they needed to take were only offered Tuesday and Thursday, and they were jam-packed in classes all day long. Course distribution is also important in the context of program maps. For example, if a student signs up for a program with the expectation that they will take classes at night, all of the courses need to be offered at night as they progress. They shouldn't complete 2 terms and then only find out as they attempt to register for the 3rd term that none of the classes they need are offered at night. Course and section fill rates is another important metric to examine. Particularly in popular GE courses or milestone courses, institutions should look to see if all the sections offered are consistently at capacity. This may be an indication that not all students are able to access these courses when they need to. I won't go over each individual data point here, but the questions listed on this slide are a good starting point to see if students can indeed access all the courses that they need as they progress. So now that we've discussed some of the more important data points institutions should incorporate into their course schedule, I'd love to learn from you all what data you use to inform your course schedule. Please select all of the data points that your institution uses during the scheduling process, and then if we missed any key data points here, please feel free to also drop them in the chat. So we've launched the poll. We'll close it in about 50 seconds here. Okay, let's take another 10 seconds or so. Perfect. We're going to go ahead and close the poll now. So looking at the results here, it's more similar to our first poll response where we had a more even spread. But it's awesome to see that a lot of you on the call are using different data points to inform the course schedule. Most commonly fill rates, so that tells me that we're really looking at making last minute modifications and responding in real time to student demand as we're seeing classes fill up. And then also enrollment at program and course level. So what are those enrollment trends looking like? How are those changing? And that can help to inform adjustments that we might need to make as we roll over the schedule. And then lastly, the third big one here is enrollment trends by course modality. So really looking at online students versus in-person students, which is of course a very important piece of the puzzle as well. Bridget, do you have any additional thoughts based on what we just walked through?
Yeah, I think it's really encouraging that, so many folks are, it looks like analyzing their course and section fill rates, since, I think that's definitely a pretty big one to, make sure that you're meeting student demand. But it seems like there are also some opportunities here too for, maybe proactively looking at some data sources here. I think particularly, data from degree audit systems, that's a great one that you can look at ahead of time and see, okay, this many students, really do need to take this course this semester to stay on track. So I think that's another great one to think about and something we've been thinking a lot here at Course Dog as well.
Absolutely. So using data to inform the course scheduling process is just one tool we can use for promoting course accessibility. We can also create and promote scheduling policies to ensure certain detrimental scheduling practices aren't even allowed in the first place. So first, standard meeting patterns ensure that all courses adhere to a standard set of times so that courses aren't offered during overlapping times. This ensures students don't have to choose between courses and also helps to optimize space. Sometimes for classes with high demand, it makes sense to allocate seats for certain groups of students. For example, a certain number of seats or sections are reserved for first or second year students that may otherwise have been shut off or shut out of the courses due to later registration periods. You'll see there are many different scheduling policies to consider, but they all revolve around ensuring students can access the courses that they need. Whether this is making sure they are offered at the appropriate time or putting in place rules to ensure co-rec and pre-rec courses aren't offered at the same time. So with all of that being said, I want to quickly cover how CourseDog can help your institution create a student-centric schedule. CourseDog empowers academic administrators to support on-time completions and operational excellence with integrated academic and event scheduling, course demand projections, curriculum management, and online catalog solutions through a single bidirectional integration with your SIS. Our system is highly configurable, enabling institutions to support their unique business processes while implementing general best practices. Our newest product, Academic Operations Analytics, gets to the heart of our mission and is also the one that I manage, so particularly love it. But scheduling analytics uncovers hidden insights for institutions and ensures the number of seats and sections offered align with student demand. It also makes guided recommendations around when to offer the sections to avoid scheduling conflicts that could impact a student's degree progress. Curriculum analytics helps institutions to build clear pathways and make decisions that ensures their curriculum is financially sustainable.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Mara. Well, I know we really covered a lot there in the past almost 40 minutes or so. So we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions now. So feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A function, and then we'll go ahead and get to those. We'll give everyone a few seconds to gather their thoughts and type in any questions they may have, and then we'll get to them. All right, Mara, I'm seeing a question here that I think you could answer. This person said, you mentioned the use of degree audit data in your presentation. Can you talk a little bit about how CourseDog uses that to help project course demand?
Yeah, definitely. So with the degree audit, that is something where we are specifically looking at a institution's student data from their degree audit system. And we're really looking at what are the classes that they've taken historically, and then what are we predicting based off of that they're going to take next. So we're mapping that to a program map, so very explicit and clear path to graduation so that we can accurately predict what classes are going to need to be offered to keep them on track to that degree.
Awesome. I'm seeing another question here that says, once you have the data, how are you influencing departments and faculty to adhere to best practices? Mara, any thoughts there?
Yeah, so this is a great question and a conversation that I have with pretty much all of our partners, because we know that most often change management is the hardest thing to implement when introducing a new software. And we absolutely want your team to find the recommendations really easy to use. And so a couple of the different things that we've done, in addition to leading trainings with department and faculty, providing a lot of help documents as well, is we've integrated a lot of the recommendations from course demand projections directly into the scheduling UI, so that as schedulers are going through and executing that process, it's really easy for them to reference the recommendations. And then we also have a rules engine in scheduling, which will say, hey, flag, this isn't aligned with what we're predicting demand is going to be, or what we're predicting the class conflict times are going to be as well. So it's definitely a collaborative effort, but one that we're invested in and support as well.
And I would also add here too, I think just the transparency key is also super key here too when thinking about that data. I feel like we talk to a lot of administrators and they're like, oh, only one person on campus has access to this data, or, I have to run a Cognos report every time I want to get it. And I think what's great about the CourseDog platform is, all of your deans, all of your department schedulers, all of them have access to that data. They don't have to have any special technical skills or go track someone else down to find that data. So really putting it in their hands, I think helps them, make those informed decisions, which I think can be super helpful. All right. One other question here, talking about how, finding the right course balance can be a real struggle when you're scheduling non-traditional classes, such as, adult education, ESL, around the typical university timetable and thinking about how that works. Any thoughts there, Mara?
Yeah, so I'd say for this item, there are a number of different features and things that we recommend considering, specifically, I think, with that distributed schedule, which we kind of talked about with prime time, really wanting to make sure that the schedule entirely is spread out over time, but also understand that some of those non-traditional classes may not follow the university timetable explicitly. So I would definitely recommend having a process in place for reviewing those exceptions, and making sure that those classes that are within that program as well, or the ones that are likely to create student conflicts for those non-traditional learners, are distributed and also aligned with when it's predicted that they'll be able to take those classes.
Absolutely. I'm seeing another question here. This person's asking, which SIS platforms does CourseDog integrate with? And they said their college uses PeopleSoft. So yes, we do integrate with PeopleSoft, but Mara's our product expert here, so I'll let her kind of speak to the different integrations we have.
Yes, I would definitely point to our website that I think goes into more detail on the specific integrations. At least for course demand projections right now, we integrate with PeopleSoft, Workday, and Banner and Colleague. And absolutely, if you're interested in outside of those SISs, would love to have a conversation because that isn't going to be fixed forever. Let me go ahead and pull up a link to our SIS integrations more broadly. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and drop this in the chat, and you can check out in full detail all of the different integrations across our platform.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Mara. I'm not seeing any more questions, at least for now, in the Q&A function. So if anyone has any final thoughts here, feel free to go ahead and drop those in and we will get to that. But before we close out for the day and let everyone go, just wanted to have one last final poll question here. Just, for our internal purposes, no need to share the poll results with everyone here. But yeah, just feel free to select a simple yes or no here. And then I think we can go ahead and get on our way, give everyone a few minutes back in their day. So, if you need to take a break before your next meeting, you'll have some time to do that. But again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I think this has been a really great discussion. Loved seeing all of the poll results, loved all the questions we got. Always great to have an engaged audience. So thank you so much, everyone, for that.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.